I'm excited to chat with AlyseMarie Warren today on the Awaken Feminine podcast. AlyseMarie is a master healer and the go-to spiritual sidekick for high-level leaders. She helps high-achieving women that have created 6- and 7-figure businesses to create safe spaces to rest, heal, and process their success. She is also an executive chef and a #1 international best-selling author. She's one of the co-authors in Prosperity Codes, and I know she has so much love and wisdom to share with us today. She's joining me all the way from Chicago. Welcome to the show, AlyseMarie.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited. Yes.
Fabulous.
Yeah, I'm excited for our conversation. And I know it's quite late where you are as well. So I'm like, thank you so much for taking the time to be with me. So before we dive into our conversation, I really love to ask you this question, which is, what is your definition of an awakened feminine?
My definition of an awakened feminine is someone who listens to herself, someone who understands the cues of her own body and her own spirit, and really understands what the language of her heart is.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Now, AlyseMarie, let's dive into our conversation. Today, we're having a free-flow conversation, and I love these because we don't know where we're going to head. But I really would love for you actually to share a bit more about who you are and why you do what you do, because I know you have your own restaurant, you're a chef, but how did this like master healer come in? Because they're quite two different industries.
They're two different industries, but they're also so similar. I grew up in the Catholic Church, and the laying of hands was something that we did growing up. And so I've always understood the power of my hands. It was something I loved to be a part of. And I've always been a really intense hugger. I love hugs. It was something that my family did. I've always understood the power of it, so much so that I took it upon myself to teach my nephews how to hug, because I thought someday their wives are going to thank me. Because it's such an important thing. Like, it's something that I love. And it's something that people are always coming to me like, oh, can I have a hug? Can I have an Ally hug? And it was such a specific thing. And so I've always known the power of my space, and food was how I communicated that for a long time. And it still is, don't get me wrong. It's how I first learned to really tap into my intuition, and a place I felt really safe using my intuition. I've always cooked just by feel and taste and just my own knowing. And then when I found Reiki at first, it clicked. Something just clicked in me. Oh, and once I opened the door, spirit was like, hey, there's so much more. And it was something my mom was really into alternative healing when I was younger. So it's always been in my space. And I've never been a fan of doctors. I've had lots of bad run-ins with doctors. And I just thought, man, my body has to be able to do some of this itself. And so I tapped into it first for myself, never thinking I was going to do it for other people. And then it just made sense. People were like, wow, your energy is crazy. Like, I love being in this space. And it was like, once I really got into it, I realized that my energy really works for people who already understand their own awakening, who really already understand their own power, and who are already in the space of being willing to do their own work. As I long time working with people at a lower level, and it's like, oh, I'm really beyond this space. Like, you have to be willing to take the baton when those portals open, because that's what's happening. A lot of people would be scared because they're opening these portals and they're not ready to do the work that's going to lie inside that space. And so with high level people, it's like, you've already taken up your own baton. And once I found that space, it was like, oh, these are the people who really understand the energy that I'm bringing to them, beyond just like, hey, can you shift my mood?
Yeah.
I work on a day-to-day basis in the restaurant, like I'll find my servers coming close to me like, hey, can I just get a little bit of a mood shift? Like, help me out a little bit. Because I've always been an energy cleaner. So as I'm walking down the street, I'm cleaning people's energy and I'm doing things, and you can feel the shift of just being in my space. But when I was really allowed myself to open that door, that like higher people are really need to be held in this way. You need a way to process your own success, your own stuff. And sometimes you don't need the coaching space. You just need someone to hold the space for you. And so when I like, oh, because the way that I work, my team's been assembling for lifetimes. Like I can feel them. They all feel like people I've known for so long. They've just been waiting for this space to come about. And so they're ready. They have so much wisdom and knowledge that I used to say I kind of stepped out of the way for, and I let them do the healing. And I realized it's not true. Like I'm totally there helping them facilitate all of this stuff. So I guess it all came about, like healing and chef life came about because just the power of my hands, right? Chef was something I do because it made sense when I didn't understand the awakened state. And so it's something that I learned. It was something I was really good at. And I love supporting people in that way and fueling them in that way. I found that my food not only fed them physically, but healed them mentally and really nourished their spirit being in that space. So it just made sense.
Yeah. I love your story.
I think in the chapter I say, like, I've always been healing one plate at a time. And it's true. And I never really bridged the gap for a long time. Most of the time in my awakening, chef life was over here and all the alternative stuff I was doing was on the other side. And I didn't tell people in my muggle life what I was doing when I was being magical. And I didn't tell magic what I was doing when I was being a muggle. And so I'm realizing now, like, I have to be an integrated being. And that allowed me to step into a new space.
Yeah. Harry Potter fan. I was like, she said muggle.
How can you not be a Harry Potter fan?
Oh, I love it. My dad is a chef. So, just what you were saying about using your intuition to cook and, really nourishing people, not just physically, but, mentally and spiritually through your through food. I think that's so true because our family is like food is so important in our family. And my dad is a really great chef and very intuitive with how he cooks as well. And I really believe like if he allowed himself, he would like go into the healing space. But I think just that generation is a bit different. But he's got that that knowledge and wisdom in him for sure. And I want to ask you then, how did you then, because you talked about, okay, you have chef life and then you kind of went into Reiki. Was there something that brought you there?
Yes.
Do you mind sharing?
Yeah, of course. I had my third miscarriage and I just knew that there had to be something more. I had to find to heal myself. I had to feel whole when I felt so broken. And so I went directly. I had found a circle of local friends who were doing Reiki and different stuff. And they'd done a few sessions on me. And I was like, wow, this is really powerful. But they lived on one side of the city and I lived on another side of the city. And so then I ventured into, to the internet and said, okay, I have to find a spiritual community where I can start to just explore and find what works for me. And I found a community and it didn't work for me. It was not the right place for me, but I found one human in this place who said she literally one day she just posted I'm looking for a person who fits these classifications. And she's the thing that kept me on my spiritual journey. Me answering my intuition, saying those things are me, led me to say, okay, there has to be more people out there that are looking for me, that are looking for these. I can't be alone in this journey. And so then I just started exploring and finding people that made sense for me, finding mentors and finding coaches. And I took Reiki really early, but it probably wasn't the right Reiki master for me because it wasn't like a nurturing space. But I said, you know what? Find someone who is that for me. And my first mentor was that for me. She was very nurturing, very mentoring. She held my hand when I told her, like, I'm going to be super needy because I was really self-conscious. I didn't have a lot of confidence and I needed someone who could hold me really tightly. And when I felt like I was slipping, could be like, you can do it. You know, I needed that cheerleader. And so I just knew that someday I was going to wake up and feel whole. And I was committed to that journey.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that vulnerable story. Yeah, but wow, you know, I totally agree and resonate with what you say about finding the right person for you. And also that, you know, there definitely is more people that are on the journey, because I think when you start your awakening and the whole, you know, spiritual process, it's very lonely because you feel like no one understands, but in reality, so many people understand and get it.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think for me, what made it, I don't want to say easier because none of it was easy, but what made it easier for me is I'm really comfortable being vulnerable. So I was really comfortable, like, putting myself out there in spaces where maybe some other people were not comfortable in opening up in that way. That's always been something I've been really good at, is just saying, I don't care what you think of me. I'm going to put everything on the table. I'm going to be super vulnerable. I'm going to cry and I'm going to share my story, because there's always been such power in that. In the first book I wrote in Legacy Speaks, I wrote about my suicide attempt when I was younger and how Jesus came to me and said, you're going to share your story. And I've always taken that as like a really serious task of knowing that that was part of my journey. So being comfortable, being vulnerable was something that I knew that I just had to do. I had to be really honest about my journey. And so I was comfortable putting myself out there when a lot of people felt lonely because they were scared. And I was like, what do I have to lose? I'm already at the bottom. Like, I was already broken. I was already at the bottom. I already didn't have any of the things I wanted. So in this space where nobody actually knew me, what did I have to lose?
Yeah. Vulnerability is so powerful because we go about our days just having this mask on and we don't want people to see what we perceive as weakness. But when you have that strength to share your vulnerable story, that is so powerful and so strong. It's not weak at all. So I love that, you know, that you decided to take the path into sharing your story. Do you mind sharing with us what made you decide to write? Because, you know, it's, I mean, a lot of people think about becoming an author or sharing their stories, but most of the time people either don't know what to do or they procrastinate or like a whole host of things that can prevent us from doing it. What made you decide to take that step into going into sharing your story through writing?
I mean, Bridget.
Yes, I love Bridget.
I had kind of quietly followed her for a long time and we'd had a few interactions. And when she put out her first book, I like sent her a few names of people who I thought would be really good because I didn't feel like I fit any of her classifications. And so her and I were chatting back and forth and she's like, okay, but now what about you? And I was like, I don't meet any of this. I'm none of these. Like, really? Like, maybe you're all of those things. And I was like, well, no. And then like her just like seeing that in me made me think like, I'm not seeing myself. And so Spirit just kind of kept nudging me like, you have to do this. You have to do this. You know that you're supposed to share your story. What better way? Like, what better way than stepping into this space? And I've always written really long Instagram posts and like, I love the power of words. I love language. But I didn't feel qualified to step into that. So once I stepped out of the way and said, okay, well, she sees it and she's running the show, let me step into this space and start sharing story. And it was literally like a floodgate after that. Like that's basically what Spirit has told me is my coaching program. Like stepping into these book spaces has been my ultimate healing journey. I've opened up spaces for myself that I never imagined being able to do outside of writing these books.
Yeah.
Because once I sit down to write, like there is no more mask to hide behind. Like whatever is going to come out is going to come out, whether I like it or not.
Yeah.
And whatever is going to happen because of that, the door is already open. I don't have a choice to go through the healing journey. I have to go through it first. In some cases, I have to go through it afterwards because that's what I was ready for. But I have to go through the journey. If I'm going to point you in a direction, I also have to go through it. And so for a while, Spirit has been asking me, like, be your own coach, do these things for yourself because you need to get to this space. And I was like, I don't know how to do that. And they gave me the tool. Writing was that tool, is that tool. It's been the most incredible year of my life.
Yeah. So you're in Legacy Speaks, and I know you're in Prosperity Codes with me. Are they the two books, or is there more? I think you've got more, right?
Yeah, I did Lineage Speaks, and then I have Intuitive, She Sees Her Truth, coming out at the end of the month, and then I've also signed 3 more books.
Oh my goodness, that is amazing. I think, definitely once you start getting into that space, it's quite addictive. Right?
Yeah. Like, I've always said that once you get on your healing journey, a lot of times so many things are lurking in the shadows that you can't face them until you're in the space of them. And that's what these books have done for me. Writing these chapters have brought me to spaces. It was like, oh, this is how I needed to get here. Like writing Lineage Speaks probably gave me the most realization I've ever known. I felt confident going into the book, and I was like, I'm good. Like the story just flowed. It was totally channeled. I was like, this isn't about me. Boy, was I end on that chapter. It was like, okay, cool. Now you get to do all of those things that you just wrote about. Now you get this journey. Enjoy. So yeah, it's just such an epic way to see yourself and to hear your own voice and to coach yourself. My sister and I are kind of a duo. She does all of my editing before I send it in. And so hearing her read the chapter to me as she's editing is like one of the most powerful experiences.
Yeah. Well, as soon as you said that, I was like, whew, goosebumps going on. Yeah. It's really such a healing process, writing. I didn't realize until I did a book called Uncensored, Untamed, Unleashed before Prosperity Codes, and I was like, wow, what's this? I thought I had healed, but as I was reading the words that I wrote, it was like the floodgates open. I'm like, oh my goodness, like it was. But then it feels so freeing. I think it's just that final piece that you have to let go of. I think when you write it and you put it out to the world, it's like, okay, I'm fine. I'm okay to share this story, and you kind of let that last bit go. What do you think of? What are your thoughts on that?
I totally agree. I think there's just something about the way that you're able to, it's the process also of writing it. Like for me, I generally just sit down and channel and I write it and whatever. And Prosperity Codes was a little bit different. I like booked a luxury hotel room for myself and sat in days and just wrote my chapter. And I thought that it was going to be kind of like Lineage Speaks, where I was just going to channel Mary Magdalene. I was going to sit down and blah, blah, blah. And I got to the hotel room and she's like, okay, here's the journey. You ready to like venture through your life and like go through these memories and, be vulnerable with yourself about the things that, I wasn't looking at. I had gone through my life and looked at how abundant I had been for small moments. Like a lot of people don't have those things. And so the process of writing is it's almost like excavating. It's almost like going and like excavating things out, it's like you get all of this stuff out of the way. You get all of this fluff. There's nothing to hide behind. It's just you and the paper. And then once you send your chapter, it's like, okay, all of those things that I had been hiding behind, or I, didn't want to show the world, or, whatever your thing is, they're gone.
Mm.
You get to just venture into this new space where you're someone different. Yeah. Like it's like, I don't want to say simple, because nothing about ever simple, but it's that easy. You get to just have the full process in the space of your writing space, and then go through whatever journey you're going to go through. But it's like, you already know at the end, everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I love it.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. AlyseMarie, do you mind sharing with us, because I know you said channel a few times when you write. Do you mind going through your writing process and what channeling actually means, so that the audience understands a bit better, like your process?
For sure. So when I channel, I'm opening the door to allowing someone else to speak through me. For me, most of the time, it's Mary Magdalene. I also have 2 ancestors that I channel. And I always say, for me, it feels like a filing cabinet. And I like open the drawer, and I know what's going to come out. Like, I can just feel it. And sometimes I step out of the way, and I, like, when I wrote Lineage Speaks, it was almost like someone else wrote the chapter. When I read it for the first time, I was like, holy crap. Of this, I felt like I went into a trance state and I was somewhere else. But channeling is just really being open to the idea and to the possibility that there are people, there are spirits, there are things out there that have something to say that can only come through you.
It's so powerful. Thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah, I love your writing process. That's really cool. Mine's a little bit different to yours. I guess it's still channeling, in that I just allow the words to come through, because I think once you're in that space, the words just flow through, and I'm the same. But if I sit in front of the computer, I'm like, okay, I need to do this now. I'll be sitting there and I'll be going, what am I writing? I don't know. And nothing comes out. But once you open up that space, it's like, okay, right, everything's just flowing through, and I finish my chapter very quickly, because it just comes.
Yeah, I find I have to kind of create ritual around it, and really set myself up with like the knowledge that, like, the first chapter I wrote, I did it a little bit more like school. And, like, I wrote a few words, I wrote some here this day, and I wrote some another day, and then I tried to like bridge the gaps and like build them all together. And after that, I realized 3,000 words is not that daunting.
Yeah.
When I first heard it, I was like, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to do that? Like, it's been so long since I wrote that many words. And then I realized it's really not that many words, once you get started. And so once I let that go and stepped out of my own way and said, yeah, I can do 3,000 words. And I just sort of created the space for myself. I, do my meditation. I like get set up, get ready, move my body, light my candles, and like just say, okay, I'm here for this thing. Then I don't have that issue of like, I don't know what to write. And when I do have that issue, I know that I have to step out of the way. Like, I have to get out of my own way and allow my brain to just kind of take a back seat, because the words are already there. Every chapter's already been written. I just have to not allow my mind to get in the way, because my human experience is a part of the process, but it's not the thing that's going to write the chapter.
Yeah. That's amazing. Thank you for that. I want to jump back a little bit. From at the beginning, you were saying that you give great hugs. And I really want to talk a little bit about that, because I love giving hugs as well. And so when you said that, I'm like, oh, she's a hugger. And I, can't wait to meet you in person and get AlyseMarie hug special. But when did you discover that you give great hugs? Like, how does, what defines a great hug? Yeah, do you mind talking a bit about that?
For sure. This will be my one day. I 100% promise this. But a good hug is that hug that like you feel yourself relax into, right? They'll give like the tap off, they kind of put their arm around you and they tap your back and you're like, that's the exit. Like that's the sign of like, okay, this is done. I was young when my aunt first started asking specific me to give her a hug because I'm really hold the space for you. I'm not ever going to like cut the hug off. Like if you need me to hug you for 10 minutes, I'm going to hang minutes. And I read energy pretty well. So I kind of know. And even if someone's play, but you can feel their spirit being like, I really need more of this, but they feel uncomfortable about holding the space. I'm not afraid to like continue to hang on to you until you relax.
Yes.
Once you relax, then I'm like, okay, they've come here for something and I will give you whatever space you need. But there's something about someone like fully wrapping their arms around you and just holding you just enough that you know that you're safe. There's something about that safety that can only be communicated by bodies that's just so important. We spend so much time in a handshake culture that is afraid to share space with people. Hugging is so important. I grew up in a family of huggers. My parents were, huggers. I love you, all of the stuff. So when I went to other people's houses and like at night, they weren't giving each other hugs, I was like, what's happening? I don't understand. You mean your parents don't tell you they love you before you're going to bed? And so it was really interesting for me. So at a very young age, I realized that like not everyone was like that. Not held that space for each other. And so I just started doing it. Literally just started doing it for people. Like hug. And like my friends knew, like, you need a hug, you go to Allie. You need mama energy, you go to Allie. Like that's where you go. And so I just honored that space for myself. That was something that I could give to people that was free, that I didn't have to be ashamed of, that people actually like craved. And so I just continued to be that person for people because it felt so important.
Yeah, I love hugs, and a good hug makes you feel so, I don't know, that feeling of just safety, like you're saying, safety and warm and loved and held. So I just love a good hug. And as an Asian, growing up in an Asian background, Chinese family, if you come to my house and be like, what? Your parents don't say I love you? They don't give you hugs? That's very stereotypical Asian, like Chinese family. So I don't even know where I got the I love hugs so much. I give good hugs. I've been told by people that I give good hugs, but I don't know where mine came from because I didn't, not unlike you, where you actually grew up with people that like hugs. I just I'm very huggy. Yeah.
Story goes that my dad's family they were not I love you, they were not huggers, they were not that way. My mom has a brother who has Down syndrome, and so her family became very affectionate very early because they learned that there was a really important thing in family bonds when her brother was born. And so she brought that to my dad's family and turned us all into huggers. And not everyone gives them the same as I do, but we realized the importance of like saying hello and actually meaning it, like actually someone and giving them that hug. And, when I cry, that's what I want. I want a hug. I want someone just to hold me for a minute. When I looked for, when I dated, that was important. It was like, how do you hug? Yeah. Oh, you're terrible. Probably not going to work.
Yeah. My husband he's not a hugger, but he is much better at it now. And he knows that if I'm upset, I just need a hug. I don't need you to fix my problem, because I think men tend to like to go, but if you did this, I'm like, no, stop being logical. I just need a hug.
Yeah.
Like, that's all I want. Just hold me and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I just don't think that we talk enough about nonverbal communication and how important the language of nonverbal communication is. Yeah. We just don't. We spend too much time on actual language to, not understand how to read body language and how to do those things and how to help people in that way, because there's so much power that comes when you're like, I don't need to fix it for you. I just need to hold this space for you. Mm-hmm. I just need you to know, as you're working through this, that you're safe. Yeah. And that's what I tell you. And I can't tell you that through words because it sounds disingenuous. But when I hold you and you can feel it in your whole body and regulate your nervous system in that way, it's like, oh, I understand. Yeah. I get it.
Yes. Yeah, I never thought about it that way, but that makes complete and total sense. Yeah.
I also light language, so I completely understand, like, as I've developed the nonverbal part, even though light language is verbal for a lot of people, there's something that happens when you just close your eyes, set your body down, and like just allow your nervous system to understand something, your heart to understand something. And that's what hugs do. You're able to just like shut down all of your other senses and just tap into your heart and say, okay, how do I regulate my body? What does my body need right now in this space? And you can listen to a part of you that doesn't come out when you're talking, when you're having conversation. It's something that only happens when you can shut all of those things down.
Yes, that makes so much sense. And, just even thinking about when you're talking to someone and they might be telling you something, but you can see from how their energy and their body language that it's not what they're telling me, is either there's something deeper to it, or they're not telling me the truth, or, there's some sadness, but they're talking about something that's happy. So you can read that, and it's from the body language and their energy. So it's, yeah, definitely. So I want to talk a bit about your light language. You said most people are verbal. My light language is verbal. I also, sometimes it's not verbal, but most of the time it's verbal. I wanted to find out what your light language is like.
Oh, I mean, I have so many light beings that come through that it's really specific a lot of times to the person. But I don't really know how to describe it.
Okay.
It's so, it's such a difficult thing to like put into words, being something that's verbal, but also not understand, physically understand it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it comes through like song. When I first tapped into it, I had to like get my mind wrapped around the part of me that really heard it as some type of Asian language, or something like that. 'Cause it had that tonation, and like, am I just mimicking something? Like, am I just mimicking something? Oh, but when I was able to settle into it and allow my voice to fluctuate the way they want it to, it was like the most beautiful music that I could make. And the way you feel it is so interesting, because sometimes mine comes out like a whisper. Sometimes they want to be this really low kind of whisper sound. Sometimes it's really loud. And when I speak to Brandy, one of my other fellow, the person who speaks for her is very low and guttural. And it's like, hey, they just came to me and were like, can you just give Brandy a message for me?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. And I just, voice messaged her and was like, hey, this thing came through for you, so here you go. But hers, I know when it's hers because it's like I can feel it in my belly. It's like so much lower, this like man sort of chanting gutturals. And so light language is kind of like a hug. It's something that your completely understands, even though your brain can make literally no sense of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that asks your brain to step out of the way. Like, how many times could we solve so many more problems if our brain would step out of the way?
Yes, for sure. Yeah. Oh, I love that. How, yeah, you know that if brain is like guide comes through, then it's how you feel it so differently. And yeah, it's different every single time. It's yeah, I just love it when it comes through. And same as you, when I first started, like, you know, speaking light language, it was like, okay, is it just me making all these weird sounds? Like, is, you know, you kind of have that doubt in your head going, okay, what is this? But yeah, now it's just like, oh, okay, cool. It's just different every time, and just no expectations and no, what's the word? No expectations, and yeah, just letting it flow through. Like, as you say, letting your brain step out of the way to allow that light to come through.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it makes me feel when I say it, but I love hearing other people be like, oh my gosh, I felt that in my body. You know, I felt that in my body. When something doesn't make sense, but it makes sense. There's something so beautiful about being the channel for that.
Yeah. It's beautiful. So I want to jump back to something that popped into my head about hugs. So I was having a conversation with Mary a few weeks ago, and she was talking to me about hugs going in on the left, because it's like heart to heart, compared to like if you go in to do a hug and you're not heart to heart. Have you had experience with like which way you're going for a hug, which side you're going for a hug?
I always feel myself going in full, like both sides. And when people tend to go to one side or the other, I tend to adjust them. Like I'll body very gently to kind of adjust them to center space. Because yes, the heart is here, but the heart center for me is directly in the center. And so I generally try to like connect there. And that's where I feel my most powerful energy channel is directly from the center. And so I generally tend to go to energy center. So I've never really thought about it that way, but I'm definitely going to be more conscious of it now.
Yeah.
But I have like adjust people like very
like, don't go to the side, come back to the middle.
Center. I want to have that Care Bear stare with you, you know, like I want to hold that space with you. I want to be directly connected for those seconds or minutes that we hold each other in that space. Because there's just something so powerful about being not just in like your physical heart space, but in your energetic heart space that opens both of you up in a way in which I think people generally aren't expecting.
Yeah, totally agree. This first popped into my head because you say you work a lot with Mary Magdalene. How did you start connecting with her?
A few different reasons.
Okay.
I've always been very connected to Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and Mother Mary. They've always just been in my space. And I thought it was just because I was in the church that it made sense that those three were in my space a lot. But then I had one of my very first like regular healing clients. She worked with Mary Magdalene, and the more I was in the space of someone else who held that space, the more I saw all the connections of people who were connected to Mary Magdalene. And I realized that like, this was just the power of this lifetime that I'm in, to be in this space. I've also shared a lifetime with her. And so she's someone who's just regularly come into my life. And this lifetime was about breaking contracts. And so she needed to be here to do that with me. And then when I allowed her into my space, she was like, okay, you're ready for me. And she needs an awakened feminine. Like she needs someone who's ready to step into that power. And I wasn't for a long time. I didn't even understand what that meant. Even through my awakening journey, I didn't understand awakening my feminine part for a long time. I knew my soul was awakening, but my feminine was like, I don't know about this. And so when I finally stepped into that, she was like, yes, bitch, like, let's do this. And the woman who I was working with, she had been doing Mary Magdalene healing and was no longer being able to hold that space. She knew that her time was coming to an end. And Mary just kind of chose me. She just kind of, you're what I'm looking for. And so I said yes.
That's so beautiful. I love that story so much. I forgot my question. As you were talking, I was like, oh, I need to ask her that, but I totally forgot what it was now. That's okay. Just jump. So with Mary, like how do you mind sharing? I remember the question now. You were saying that you didn't know that you had to awaken your feminine and during your spiritual journey. Do you mind elaborating a bit more about maybe your spiritual awakening and, then discovering the need to awaken that feminine side of you?
Yes. So I never really like fully comprehended the fact that there was like a sacred feminine and a sacred masculine, and that each of us sort of had this balance. I just was. And so when the feminine started coming into my space, it was like, sexual and, liberated and all of these things, where it was like, I did not feel comfortable being in that space. And so as I started feeling into that uncomfort, I was like, oh, that's because there's a whole piece of me that I'm not willing to tap into, because I've always been in a bigger body. That was really uncomfortable. And I didn't think that the divine would choose a body like this, that I wasn't worthy of awakening that part of me, because I had been laughed at a lot when I would step into a more feminine space. And I thought, maybe this just isn't for me. Maybe I'm just not supposed to be this person. Maybe this doesn't actually live inside me. But then the more I started turning it off or like denying it, the more it started coming into my space. And it was like, okay. And then I found this very beautiful human who was very liberated and very into her feminine. And she started talking about it. And I was like, this is what I've been missing. I've been missing a piece of myself. Structure doesn't really work for me. I don't really love structure. Leaning so hard into this, being in the chef world, being in the corporate restaurant world, I had been leaning so hard into this structural masculine part of myself that I was doing things like having pink hair and wearing dresses and all of these things, trying to tap into my awakened feminine or trying to feel feminine. But I realized like it was all outward stuff and I needed to find the inward stuff. And I started just, instead of saying like, I don't do that, or that's not me, that's not who I am, I started just changing my language and being like, I'm not there yet. I want those for myself. And so like, talking about my yoni was really uncomfortable. Like sharing that space with someone was really uncomfortable. For me, everything having to do with my body and sexuality felt like a dirty little secret, like something I shouldn't share with people, I shouldn't talk about. And I realized that was the masculine programming that I had that wasn't serving me anymore. And to fully awaken and to step into my power, I needed to allow my feminine to come into play. And it was a slow process for me because I would step into it and be like, this is really uncomfortable. And so I would step back out and I would fall into my comfort zone of being in this masculine space. And then I, would lean into like just looking feminine, thinking that was enough. And then I realized that I needed to actually like lean into flow and become present and like really understand that like there's a goddess inside me that's here, whether I like it or not, she's here. And to really be who I want to be my most authentic self, I had to find a place for her to actually be inside my body and not just something I tried on once in a while, something that I was by myself. And so I started doing things like wearing makeup and, just little stuff that allowed me to see that inside myself. And it's still an ongoing process. It's still something that I'm 100% comfortable with, because I have a bunch of body issues that, I'm working on, I'm sorting through. And then I, look at a statue of the original statue of Mother Earth, and it's like, oh, she did live in a big, voluptuous body. Like, there was a time in our life where that was feminine, to be soft and to be these things. And so, and Brandy said to me, why wouldn't the divine choose you? And it's like, oh, the power of shifting your language, the power of taking a question and turning it on its head really changed a lot for me. And I said, okay, I can be both. I can be me in this body, whatever it looks like, whenever it wants to. And I get to be feminine at the same time. I get to honor that and not hide it. And so I allowed it to awaken within me. And the more I did that, the more I found myself, but I also found the space for other people to hold that for themselves too. And I think that's the power of awakening these things within us. It's like, we don't just give ourselves permission. We also radiate the energy that other people get permission to do that too. And that's why I'm here.
Yes.
I want for you to have permission to be yourself.
Yes. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's such a beautiful story and such a great reminder that, not to suppress all the parts of ourselves that we're too afraid to go to. We, really to liberate and free ourselves, we need to tap into those parts where we feel, like you were saying, that shameful or dirty or like, we're not good enough. Tap into that and really through, for you, like now, like writing seems to be, like you say, excavating all that out, but really tapping in and freeing ourselves and being who we are, no shame, no guilt, just standing in our truth and our beauty. So that's so beautiful.
And I think there's such power in like honoring for ourselves that, yes, those things are our truths, right? Like those things being a dirty little secret for me is my truth, but it's coming to the forefront because I get to heal it. Yes. I'm at a space and heal it. I've come to this moment where it's like, oh, I have all of the tools. I have all of the power to understand that this is no longer my story.
Yeah.
This was my truth, but it isn't my truth anymore. And I think that is the power of healing. That is the power of awakening. We get to like take all of those things that have been a piece of who we were and say, yes, thank you for getting me to this space, but I'm ready to move past you. I'm ready to say that you were who I was, but you're not who I am. And thank you. Like, that's the thing that I love about healing. It's like, I get to say thank you for all of the stuff that you did to get me to this space. Because for me, there was a lot of moments where it's like, I didn't want to be here to get to this space. I was ready to leave the earth and be like, life is good. Bye. See you later. But my spirit kept saying, it's not time yet. It's not time yet. And I kept listening. And thank you for getting me to this space. Thank you for all of that held me so tightly and said, not yet, keep going. Yeah. Thank you so much, but you're not part of who I am anymore. Yeah. You're not me anymore.
Yeah. And thank you for choosing to trust spirit and staying on this earth so that you can do the great work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah. AlyseMarie, I'm just mindful of the time. So I just want to ask you, before we wrap up, what is setting your soul on fire right now?
I mean, writing is definitely setting my soul on fire. But honestly, the thing that has been for the last year, like lighting me on fire, is the women that I have met while holding these spaces, while coming into these spaces. I went into Legacy Speaks being like, I'm not good enough. Nobody's going to like me. No one's going to be able, like, I'm not going to meet anyone. And, and I manifested that. Women that I shared with that book, that all of them were having the same feelings and thoughts. Even these high-level coaches, they were like, having this similar experience of healing sister wounds. And it was like, wow, I'm not alone in that either. And every book, it's like I open up a little bit more and I can share a little bit more space with people. And I'm like, wow, it's really amazing the women that I get to share space with and hold space with and share this journey. And I get to free a part of myself in that. Like healing sisterhood wounds has been a part of my journey long before I spiritually awakened. I just never believed it was possible. And I had to do a lot of healing to get to that space, but like making sisterhood bonds and like healing those wounds has literally just been lighting my soul on fire for the last year. It's like, wow, this is what all of women are always talking about. This is amazing.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm so grateful that I've gotten to meet you through Prosperity Codes and the beautiful group of women that's in there with us. So it's just so beautiful to see you so lit up with what you're doing with the writing and meeting all the amazing women that you're getting to meet. So I just love, you just had this biggest smile on your face and I just loved it. It was amazing. It's amazing. I've just loved our conversation and I feel like we can talk more, but I'm just mindful of the time. So if you ever feel like coming back on and talking more, then I'd love to have you on at a later stage. So yeah.
Let's do it again. I love this.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your love and wisdom. If people want to find out more about you or how they can work with you, where can they find you?
Instagram is always the best way to find me. I'm usually most active on there. You can slide into my DMs, send me a message. My scheduling is a little bit wonky right now. Going into summer with the restaurant world is a little bit crazy. So most of my services are kind of on a need basis. And my regular clients first kind of stuff right now, but always opening up conversation with me is the best way to do it. My website is AlyseMarieWarren.com. You can send me an email through there. You can find all of my all of my social media links. And if I have openings pop up in my schedule, they're on there. But summer is always a little bit difficult for me with the restaurant world. And I have to just honor that because this is my busiest time of year. Yeah. So
thank you so much. Yes.
Start.
Yeah.
Books, chapters is a great place to start.
Yeah, definitely. And you've got many, many to come. So excited for that for you. Oh, that's just so wonderful. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much. And I'll have all your details in the show notes.
Thank you, Kaki. This is a beautiful space. Thank you for holding it.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.